Gather around the campfire, stallions and stallionettes, because it's story time. It's October of 2015. Lime green knuckle Microsoft sees all these third-party manufacturers of controllers making all these premium or upper-end controllers, and they decide in October of 2015 to make their own first-party Microsoft premium or pro controller. The Elite, it might not look like this devilish bastard. It might look like this white variant, or maybe this one. Fast forward to November of 2019, and the Elite Series 2 dropped, which by far is the most popular first-party pro controller for a reason. Damn good, not quality control wise. We'll talk about that later. Then in September of 2022, Microsoft released the Core, this whited out version of the Elite Series 2. I have one in hand, slightly customized. Enhanced and improved is simply incorrect. There was a teardown or disassembly done on this channel by moi with these nitty gritty flesh fingers, and the internals are the components are identical, except the plastics feel a little bit cheaper on the Core, as opposed to that rubberized soft touch faceplate that you get on the Elite OG. A little bit late to the party, a fashionably late entrance, I would say. They got a little bit of puke down their shirt. You can tell they were pre-gaming in the car, but Sony comes stumbling into the party with this McBanger with cheese over here. Now, Team Blue, Sony in this instance, not Sega, decided to drop their own first-party pro controller 2 months ago, January of 23. And it's a wonderful gamepad, as is the Elite Series 2, but they could not be any more different at their core. It was bad. Now, it has been very entertaining to watch a lot of tech channels pop up making comparisons of these two controllers, channels that never make controller content simply because it's low-hanging fruit. Now, I personally love fruit because it's nature's candy. I'm gonna grab a strawberry because I think I have a lot to add to this topic or conversation. Not to degrade any of those videos or the content creators that crafted them, however, there's a lot of information missing that I'd like to stuff. I'd like to fill the holes, the gaps of information here. If you're looking for a slightly entertaining, moderately humorous, incredibly in-depth comparison of these two controllers, then you are in the right place. We're going to break down both of these controllers category by category, things like Dpad, thumbsticks, triggers, warranty, and find out which one is the superior gamepad. Let's get it.
This is your controller captain. We've reached 6,900 feet. Go ahead and start flicking the sticks and mollywopping the back paddles.
You don't like back paddles? How about those rear buttons?
We've tested almost 100 custom and premium controllers, and we're only at the beginning. You need a thumbstick guide or tutorial on how to overclock your controller?
Check out the controller playlist. Bing bong.
Controller captain out.
As far as packaging and included accessories, I'm going to skim over the packaging because the boxes really don't matter. You've got the black and lime green trim to sport the Microsoft theme colors, and then you've got the white with the royal blue trim to sport Sony. But when things do start to matter is when you look at the included accessories and the two carrying cases for these controllers, because they're very, very different. The Elite Series 2 does use a soft carrying case virtually every other premium or pro controller uses. Now, these don't provide the best protection, and you can do things like this. Not to mention, with most of these carrying cases, unfortunately this one included, it puts the included USB-C cable directly over the thumbsticks to where when you close it, it is cocking out your thumbsticks. Rock on, brother. Your thumbsticks ain't gonna be rocking on for very long, potentially, because it is cocking out your thumbsticks pretty much maxed out like this. And when you have a controller with potentiometer thumbstick modules that don't happen to be swappable, that can be an issue.
There's a helicopter. Dropping in a care package for me.
Because I've been killing it on YouTube, the 7 kill streak, so they're dropping in a care package of new recording gear for me. New lights. Now, both of these carrying cases do a fantastic job of carrying all the included accessories, and there is more included accessories on the Elite Series 2. Now, both these controllers go back and forth in the included accessory department, and it was really hard to decipher a victor until it wasn't. The fact that this is a soft carrying case that does not provide the same protection as a hard plastic carrying case like this one, not to mention, this does put the cord directly over the thumbstick. As there is full clearance on Sony's model, the USB-C cord fits perfectly in front of both of the analog sticks, so that's sick. With the Elite Series 2, you are going to have two options of D-pads. You are going to have this magnetic wheel, which has always been my preference, not only in feel, but also in appearance or cosmetics. Then you're going to have a typical 4-point D-pad. Pre-installed on the controller, you're going to have two short concave sticks. How about a little bird's eye view, a little hawk's angle on these controllers? Raven's peak. I could keep going with, bird words, but I'm not going to. How about a crow's gaze on these controllers real quick? With the Elite Series 2, you are going to have a braided 10-foot USB-C cable, black with silver speckles. No dust covers, stamped with the Xbox logo on the USB-C side. You are going to have 4 metal rear paddles, full section about these later. You're going to have a tool in the middle of those, which is used for your thumbstick tension, as you do have 3 quite distinct or different settings for tension on the left and right analog stick. Love that for you, and I love that for me as well. The charging case itself can be used as a charging cradle or dock, and in this aspect, aspect, it does that better than the Edge, which also allows it to charge the controller. It has a little rubber pad here, and then you have this separate dock, which you could put out on your desk and use this as a charging cradle if you did not want to use the carrying case. But using this method, you are going to use this pass-through for USB-C, drop this bad boy in there like that, then you have these pogo pins that will make contact with 3 metal pads on the back of the controller, and you just drop that sucker in there and she starts doing her thing. The Edge, no, it doesn't really work like that. It's a pass-through. It doesn't like drop in like a cradle or anything. Pass-through for the USB-C port. Charge it through the ass end of the thing. That's not the same. Now, installed on the Elite Series 2 out of the box are going to be 2 short concave sticks, pretty much identical to what you see on a standard Xbox controller. Only difference here, they are going to be magnetized and removable, swappable if you will. I prefer the short domed on the left, which has some rings that provide pretty good grip, and on the right I have the high concave option. I do wish that this was wider and also grippier rubber or silicone compound, but it's not terrible. It's not terrible at all, and it lives right here on the right. Usually when you have to word something as it's not terrible, it's also not great either. And then you have 2 short concaved options, and you're thinking, Kevin, there's also 2 short concaved over here. You're right, but these are better concaved options. They are wider, they are grippier, and more importantly, they feel better, more supple on the fingers. These are just better. If I was going to go with short concaved options, I would be using these, but since I'm going short domed and high concaved on the Elite, that's just the way I rock her. So I only use the carrying case to hold my accessories, but I never actually put my controller in here because even with the thumbsticks removed, the thumbstick caps, I should say, puts the dang USB-C cord. How many octaves did my voice go up? Not enough to express how disgruntled I am about that. It still puts them right over the old thumbstick modules. Come on. Come on. And as for included accessories over here on the old Edgenheim, the carrying case is much better on the Edge as it does have perfect cutouts, and I do mean perfect. This really does cradle your controller in place. With the Edge, you do have a QR code which will take you to a digital version of the instruction manual. Actually, it takes you to the landing page for the controller. You scroll down, then there's an instruction manual. 10-foot braided USB-C cable up top. It does have a permanent, or something that you're probably going to hold on to, Velcro tie back over here. It is all black. I will say it is a little bit more flexible and lightweight than the Elite's USB-C cable. PlayStation logo on the USB-C end, no dust covers. You're going to have your 2 rear input options, these half domes. Then you have these lever backs, which are more traditional metal rear paddles, something like you're probably used to seeing on the Elite. They're labeled on the back of each paddle, as well as the carrying case, RB for right and LB for left. If you play wired, which you might be implored to do with the subpar battery life of this controller, this clip will help you to latch onto that USB-C port if you're somebody that's prone to having USB-C cables pop out of their hole. Not very common. This is for you. If you are the guy or gal that swings your controller overhead like a lasso to catch the competition, this accessory is for you. Usually just sitting there, USB cords aren't just popping out of the top of your controller. Included thumbstick option wise, you do have these short hybrids, which are virtually identical to the DualShock 4 controller of the PlayStation 4 or a stock DualSense of the PlayStation 5. They're these hybrids which are domed in the center, but then also concaved on the outside hybrids. While the shape is virtually identical, shape and size, as a stock DualSense controller, the rubber or silicone compound is actually grippier. It's a different material, different rubber on the Dualsense Edge. Now, unlike the thumbsticks on the Elite Series 1 and 2, which are metal and magnetized, the ones on the Edge are just held on with friction, plastic to plastic snapping onto each other, but it does feel pretty secure and snaps on with a nice distinct click. You can see the mechanism right there. There's a little rubber O-ring in there that will get you a nice snug fit. Check it out. Cut the music. Little tactile click coming at you. Oh, my lordy. Nice. And you are going to have 2 short dome sticks and 2 high, or they're labeled as high, but 2 mid dome sticks. These are some of my favorite thumbstick caps I have used in a great long while. I do prefer the shape of dome sticks I have all the way back to the PlayStation 2, but only as long as they have enough grip with that rubber or silicone compound. If they don't, then that's a no-go. I need to have concave sticks. These are just an absolute joy. As long as you don't have greasy old fingers from eating a rack of ribs and then latching onto your controller, these are grippy as all hell. Now, as for cosmetics or appearance, I do think these are both very handsome controllers. I do think the DualSense Edge looks a whole heck of a lot better without that glossy or piano black trim piece. I think it gives it a little bit more of that steampunk, rat rod, Mad Max vibe, you know, mechanical gears and cogs exposed. No cogs, but you do have these levers here, which you are at 0 risk of ever hitting in gameplay. Some of the cosmetic notes that need mentioned on the Edge is going to be the PlayStation symbols or face buttons on the touchpad. That extends onto the triggers. Also, those white rubberized grips on the back of the controller are actually tiny tiny PlayStation symbols or face buttons as well. Same as a stock DualSense controller, except etched onto rubber, not plastic. Little attention to detail Easter eggs like that is really cool, but it is not enough to slay the Elite Series 2, which I think to this day is one of the most beautiful, if not the most gorgeous first-party controller. And you might be thinking, Kevin, that's just a black controller. You hold your tongue. Simplicity in design. First of all, that brushed silver, it's a tad bit brighter than gunmetal, so we'll call it brushed silver, on the bumpers and triggers looks insanely good. Plus the rear paddles and the D-pad options are all metal and look high quality as shit. And what really just strokes my eye sockets the right way is the fact that the thumbstick bases are a glossy black or glossy titanium gray. It looks so hot. They just look great in my IMO, or in my personal opinion. Now, as far as manufacturer weight and dimensions, that's going to be popping up somewhere on the screen in this general vicinity here. It's going to be Sony over here, Microsoft over here. I'm going to keep them separated because they do get buck on each other. I've got to mediate and moderate this entire video, or they will start trying to get blows in after the bell and whatnot. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, Kevin, thank you for the tech specs, but I don't know how to read. You're not alone, comrade. So we're going to talk about the real world ergonomics or comfort. When you're actually holding these controllers, which one is more comfortable? That's a toughie because they are both very comfortable. I say it all the time. I do think that the Dualsense is a much more comfortable controller for medium to larger hands than the Dualsense for PS4, which wasn't a bad controller and really wasn't uncomfortable, but the Dualsense is more comfortable. The Dualsense Edge is less comfortable than a regular Dualsense because of this section with the swappable thumbstick modules. It actually cuts into where your middle finger would hike up the palm grips to get a nice grip with your middle fingers. You miss out on that with the Edge. That's unfortunate. You're missing out on no comfort over here on the Elite, and even with the 4 paddles installed, which generally will cut into comfort negatively, having rear paddles or buttons usually makes a controller less comfortable than a controller with nothing on the back. This beach is comfortable in gaming sessions that are longer than they should be. Something to note comfort-wise, since this controller came out prior to the launch of the Xbox Series S and X, this is an Xbox One controller, not an Xbox Series controller. Now, of course, those are cross-generation compatible. I can use Xbox One controllers on Series and back and forth. But this is a profile switch button, not a share button, as there is no share button. I know I'm getting ahead of myself into the accessory button section. One of the other differences is going to be the bumpers are not shaved in a couple of millimeters like they are in the Series controllers, and it doesn't have those dots etched or stippled into the top, the bumpers, for extra comfort. So that does make it a slightly less comfortable experience than a Series controller, but having said all that, the rubberized grips feel great, and overall the shell design, the shape in your hand feels so comfy. The Elite is just back slapping up and down the block. The Edge over here, comfort-wise, the Elite is a more comfortable controller. For sure. Build quality, shockingly enough, is going to go to the Elite. Now, before you click off the video, dislike, unsubscribe, take a dump on my doorstep, ring the doorbell twice, and kick me in the shins, let me explain there's a separate section of the video for quality control reputation, and then a separate section for warranty. But as far as percepted build quality, both of these controllers sport internal batteries. However, this controller does feel more hefty, and whether that comes down to the plastics used, or the fact that this uses a rubberized soft touch material faceplate as opposed to a smooth hard plastic faceplate over here, I'm actually purposely gonna try and bend this controller right now, and she doesn't make a peep on me. Now with the Edge, you don't lose too much structural rigidity or integrity. By having these removable modules, the controller does creak a tad bit more than I'd like. And that is in the palm grips over here. That's most likely the rubber strips that go around the rumble force motors. They're kind of like dampeners to stop rattle when the motors are vibrating. And that's probably what's squeaking in there. But it still is a sound that I don't like to hear, and I don't hear sounds like that as much on the Elite Series 2, so shockingly enough, build quality is going to go to the Elite. Now, as far as quality control reputation, this is a night and day difference, as the Microsoft Elite has a notoriously bad quality control rep. The original Elite that dropped in 2015, and then also its successor, the 2019 Elite Series 2, and then also, unfortunately, and I can attest for this personally, the 2022 Core, the white version of this controller, which I did a disassembly or teardown of. I personally experienced out-of-the-box stick drift on 2 of these controllers, which is insane, because prior to this, I had only experienced in my own personal life stick drift twice, and that was on 2 controllers that I had owned for years. two different controllers that I each owned for like years. But other than just my little tiny testimonial, if you just do a little internet search for broken elites, or that's too specific because you're looking for problems. But if you just take a gander at some Reddit post or some controller forums or YouTube, you're gonna hear a bunch of horror stories of obliterated elites. Out of the box, stick drift, broken bumpers, stuck face buttons, and then problems down the road, which used to be a huge problem because there was only a 3-month warranty. Now we're jumping into the warranty section. Needless to say, Edge has won the quality control debacle as the PlayStation 3, 4, and 5 controllers suffered from less public mention of quality control issues. Whether it's truly that Sony was making more durable controllers between those console generations, or just that less fans were complaining about it online, we'll never know, but what we do know is that the Edge wins because the quality control rep is less shitty.
Stand by! Okay, that's the last one smoked.
Now, as far as D-pad or direction buttons, both these controllers feel completely different despite the fact they both use a membrane design, so underneath their front faceplate there is going to be a rubber plunger mechanism, and that's what makes contact with the PCB or printed circuit board. These could get gummed up over time, that's pretty common, and also they do feel a little bit mushy, squishy, and not the most sensual. They're not the quickest to actuate, but they are the most common. It's what we see in most controllers. Feels a lot different on the Xbox controller. There is a little metal stabilizer ring, pictures of a disassembly or teardown, or video I should say, of a disassembly or teardown, showing this little ring mechanism, which in my opinion makes the D-pads on Xbox controllers feel a little bit more tactile and clicky, despite the fact they're not a mechanical switch, they're still membrane. So despite the fact they're a little bit more audibly noisy, they do feel better to the fingers. Following along with feeling better, you do have a 4-point D-pad as well as a wheel, and the wheel feels phenomenal in my opinion. Also, it's a little disappointing that this is Sony's first Pro controller and they could have came out of the gate swinging with some crazy shit. Like either a mechanical swappable dish like this, or mechanical switches for the D-pad. Or something else that I haven't even thought of in the R&D department. But no, just give them the old membrane D-pad. It's what they're used to. It's the missionary they've been enjoying for years. They ain't gonna ask questions about it. I do. I ask questions about it. As for the face or action buttons, this is also handled quite differently as they are quite a bit more rounded and just feel a lot more overall less secure, more rattly, hollow, tinny, just here. A better auditory sound comes out of the DualSense, and also they do feel better to me as they are more flat, less rounded than the Xbox. We just finished this whole topic with the long-term reliability or durability and the fact that Xbox controllers are notorious for stuck face buttons, as where on the PlayStation, they still use a rubber plunger design, but they hardly ever get jammed in. I fixed a couple of DualShocks here and there for friends with stuck face buttons, but it was very rare. Very rare. The DualSense Edge. Face buttons. Now, as for the accessory button sweep, this is a profile switch button, not a share button. You do have 3 LED lights here, which will indicate what profile you're in. 2 assignable ones and then a default. But you have a sync button up top, which does not exist on the Edge or any PlayStation controllers because you plug them in, you have to tether them via USB-C cord to pair them to the console. However, Xbox uses the method of pressing a sync button that falls under the accessory button suite, as does the Xbox home button, which I'm a big fan of, as it is a good size, circular, also raised up out of the front shell a little bit further on the Elite than a stock controller, making it a little bit easier to press. I really wish there was a share button on the Elite to save video clips of gameplay for B-roll. Over here on the PlayStation controller, we have a lot of additional shit in this section for accessory buttons. We have a touchpad, which is used to swipe around menus. Also on PC, you can assign this to actual buttons, like 4 different keyboard functions, so I could have this be spacebar and X. Also, you have a light bar, so in games, if you're low on health, it'll go yellow and then red, things like that. You have a built-in speaker for ambient sounds in the game. You have a microphone mute button, which is for the built-in microphone. This guy said built-in microphone? He sure did. Your headset dies, you're still calmed up with your boys. Also, with that mic mute button, hold it down for a few seconds. That actually mutes all your PlayStation sound. If you can't find your TV remote and the PlayStation's blaring music or something, just hold the mic mute button down and it cuts all your game sound. Then we have gyroscope, which is motion sense aiming, which a lot of PC players apparently like to use. So PlayStation has more accessory buttons than Xbox. However, I will say I do prefer Xbox's home home button over PlayStation with this relatively small PlayStation logo, which looks cool but can be kind of a bitch to hit. Not with this trim piece removed, it's actually very easy, but how y'all probably gonna run this controller with the little glossy piece right here, yeah, it's pretty much flush. You do have a pause and share button, which are kind of tiny and tic-tac shape, but they're in a good position. The accessory button suite is gonna go to the Dualsense Edge and stock Sony controllers, period. Now as for thumbsticks, the bases are gonna be a tie because both these controllers include anti-friction rings, so you are gonna glide along smooth plastic when you are at full lock around the outside of the thumbstick gates. This is a feature that comes with all stock Dualsense controllers. However, you only get this on the premium controllers, and only some premium controllers, I should say, because there are ones like the AIM, for example, that still just grinding on that rough plastic. Anywho, you only get anti-friction rings on some aftermarket Xbox controllers. And then thumbstick cap-wise, I'm gonna go quality over quantity for me because I like the 4 included caps of the Edge more than the 6 included caps of the Elite. Some of them I just won't even use, and they're just, you know, really like the Thumbsticks over here. I'm gonna take you to the PC for a little testing of those thumbstick modules. Over here in Gamepad Tester with the Elite Series 2, and as you can see, these thumbstick modules don't have the best resting value, especially on that left stick. Axis is 0 and 1, which is going to be the vertical and horizontal axes on the left analog stick, are not looking great. However, I was just playing with this controller a couple nights ago when there was 0 stick drift, and I didn't have my in-game dead zone sensitivities bumped up to an astronomical value or anything. It was the default, which is usually like 5 in a game. Not 0, because if you put it at 0, a lot of standard controllers might start to walk on you. Let's test the circularity, which is going to give us our thumbstick accuracy. Are there any areas of our thumbsticks where our movement is not properly being registered? Not really. This is standard fanfare for Xbox thumbsticks. I'm going to run a couple more for safe measure. Not the tightest resting dead zones, and also not the best circularity results. We're seeing a lot of red in there. That's a color that we don't want to see. Let's get the Dualsense Edge in here, please. Now over here with the Dualsense Edge, just plugged right in via USB-C cable, and as you can see, the thumbsticks are doing something, but we want to see some visual representation, so I'm going to launch DSX through Steam. You can watch. You like to watch. I know you do. Hello. Yep, and there's an update. Hi. Hello. Yes. So we are now fooling or spoofing my PC into thinking that this Dualsense controller is actually an Xbox 360 controller. That's going to give us a hell of a lot more compatibility. Let's close this. Just kidding, because if you do that, the PC will no longer read this as an Xbox controller. So what we're going to do, minimize it to the background. Same thing we do with DS4 Windows and Rewaz and Remapper and pretty much all the other controller programs. Okie dokie day, we are back in Gamepad Tester. This time we are spoofing that PC, giving it a little fool me once. We get that visual representation in Gamepad Tester, and we'll also be able to measure the stock input lag or delay and overclock. Well, you can overclock either way, but you wouldn't be able to measure the results. As you can see, these thumbsticks are doing nothing offensive, and they have very tight, responsive dead zones, not to mention, let's run the circularity test, because I do believe they will be lower than the Xbox by a bit. Less red. We're getting a little bit of pink in there, which is also rare and should be cooked a little bit better just for safety, but decent. But I'm going to do a little something in a program called DS4 Windows and then see what kind of results we can get. Now, up until extremely recently, the only program that had compatibility with the Dualsense Edge was DSX, and that was a $5 purchase through Steam. You have to launch it through Steam. You can close Steam, but you have to launch it through Steam. But now DS4 Windows, as of a recent update, has full compatibility with the Edge, and this is by far my preferred program over Rewaz and Remapper and DSX when it comes to Dualsense controllers. There's unique stuff that each one of those applications can do, and I will do full tutorials in the near future, full walkthroughs. Because of its simplicity and just fucking working, DS4 Windows is the shit. We have our Dualsense Edge controller. Clicking on edit, you will see in the other tab that it is already being spoofed or emulated as a 360 controller. That's what we like to see. A couple other things we like to see: that polling rate at 1000, which in my testing will get you just under 2 milliseconds of input lag or delay via Bluetooth to the PC. Now, that is still Bluetooth, so there is consistency issues. You can get down to the 2 millisecond range via Bluetooth, and it is gameable and playable and enjoyable. Still Bluetooth though. Not a problem on the consoles, but like Bluetooth to PC seems to be more of a problem with controllers. Getting sidetracked, but we're not here for this. We're here for this access converter. Bam! This is why I like DS4 Windows, because after doing one simple setting, well, actually it's 2 because you have to do it for each individual thumbstick, but over here in the first tab, Axis Config, LS, which stands for left stick, and if you come down here to the third value, anti-dead zone, by default it is 0.2. Go ahead and just highlight that, type in 0, hit enter, make it 0. Click on apply up top here, give you a visual representation of what that just did. So we'll make this its default value 0.2. And now over here in Gamepad Tester, it's great that these are represented at a resting value of 0.00002. That's a great great resting value, very tight, but the right stick, which has that default value, does not start to register my inputs on PC until right there. So I'm feathering as lightly as I can, as sensitively as I can on that thumbstick, and it doesn't start to register my movement until right there. It just jumps to about 0.2. As we're on the left stick, as you see, I have finite accurate control where I can break away from that dead zone ever so slightly by touching the thumbsticks. So for both the left and right stick, anti-dead zone, go ahead and make that 0.0. Hit apply, which is behind my head, I apologize. And keep in mind, like all of these controller software programs, you have to keep this running in the background. So if I try and hit X to close it out, it will warn me, hey, this is gonna mess you up. So just minimize it, but don't close it. And now, by golly, those are some tight dead zones. And also, let's test the circularity, why don't we? Okay, so I recommend running DS4 Windows in the background whenever using a DualShock 4 controller, so a PlayStation 4 controller, or a DualSense, a PS5 controller when playing on PC. It's gonna smooth out any inconsistency issues you're having with launchers or programs, and it's going to tighten up your dead zones, give you better thumbstick accuracy, and you can overclock Bluetooth if you prefer to play wirelessly but still want a fast connection. Welcome back. I didn't go anywhere, but you sure as hell did. The deciding factor for this segment, the straw that breaks the camel's back and the nail in the coffin, so to speak, is going to be the fact there are swappable modules on the Edge and there are permanently affixed modules in the Elite. Yes, you can solder these and remove them. Who the fuck wants to do that? So at the end of the day, if you get stick drift, which is one of the 3 most common catastrophic errors with controllers that will make you throw them out, you're replacing a $180 Pro controller over here, or a $200 Pro controller over here, but you're not, because you have $20 swappable modules available day and date from Sony, but also third-party vendors will make their own, maybe even magnetic Hall effect sensors. Perhaps Ghoulie Kit's already working on something like that? They are. Yeah, $20 swappable modules, which is also very reasonably priced in my opinion. Thumbsticks department, it's going to go to the Edge. Bumpers is another segment where Sony and Microsoft handled this completely different. I will say I actually like the plastics on Sony. They're very slick, doesn't sound good, but it's a very velvety, soft material that just feels very good on the fingertips. Very nice. But the shape is pretty tiny, so if you have some really large hands and you're used to hitting your bumpers with the tips of the fingers rather than the meat right here, this is going to be a real detriment for you. As opposed to the Xbox, which I think is applicable or usable for a lot more sizes, hands, as you have options to press them with the meat of your index finger or the tip. And that's because of Xbox's design where they have this little centerpiece and then it snaps in the bumpers. Not the most reliable thing, but feeling wise, it is going to go to the Elite. Now, as for triggers, you might think that there's a draw in the segment because both these bad boys sport 3-way trigger stops. That would be silly of you to imply that, because each one of these does something that the other does not. So starting with the Dualsense Edge, this does have the adaptive trigger modules that will get stiffer, lighter, depending on the action on screen. And you don't lose that functionality with this controller. You turn off the trigger stops, and I do mean turn them off completely, and you will have the adaptive triggers. If you have it on stage 2 or 3, it will turn off the adaptive trigger motors, and you get a shorter pull. However, on its third option, it only cuts out about 70% of the trigger pull, giving you that 30 percentile of dead-end slop or take-up, not what you want playing shooters. No adaptive triggers on Xbox, but you do have some pretty sweet vibration motors. But most importantly, you have 3-way trigger stops that do exactly what they should. In their off position, you get the full linear squeeze for your racing games and whatnot. Halfway mark cuts out just about halfway, 50%. And then the third position cuts out about 95% of the trigger pull. This is the entirety of your trigger pull. And even though there's this much physical take-up, the triggers actually actuate, or you start shooting your gun on screen as soon as you just sneeze on these triggers. They are 3-way trigger stops that do just that. 3 ways of trigger stoppage. Sick. Your silliness was correct, and it's a draw. It is an absolute draw, an absolute tie. They were tug-of-warring. Nothing was happening. They didn't go fucking anywhere, so... As for the Elite Series 2 paddles, I like them, and I like them a lot. They are going to be socketed P1 through 4, and you're going to take one of your, begging for change over here, you're going to take one of your metal paddles, or 2 of them, or 3 of them, any combination of them, so you can even put them in wrong. There is no wrong, but this is ergonomically stupid, but somebody might like to play like this. And you can. That's cool. Best factor of all of these being removable is if you're playing a game that doesn't need paddles, like a racing game. Not saying you can't use paddles in a racing game, but generally you don't need them. You can remove them, or if you just want to use 2 rear paddles, maybe the top 2 or the bottom 2, you can do that. But if you're playing one of those nitty-gritty shooters, those first-person... Bang Bang McShooties, antics inbound, spam and crouch, slide canceling, bee hopping, throwing knife, quick reloads. that you kids are doing in all your Twitch clips and stuff.
From the original Elite to the Series 2, there were some upgrades made. All 4 of the paddles are physically smaller, and more importantly than that, they are also closer to the rear shell, almost flush on the Elite Series 2, which is a huge step forward for comfort. Not to mention the top and bottom buttons do feel more secure when actuating them. Most importantly, the Elite Series 2 allows you to cover all 4 of the rear paddles simultaneously, comfortably, and in my opinion is one of the best rear paddle designs for Xbox. That's a question I get a lot. What in the Tookus department? What do you look for in the rump of a controller? This. Right here. One of the best paddle designs right here. Now, if we're getting into rear button designs, that opens up a whole new can of corn on a whole new pantry of a whole new commissary. Paddles and buttons are a completely different rear button input systems. A different rear input system. The final pro of the rear paddles of the Elite, since it's been out for fucking ever, the original Elite came out in 2015, the Series 2 came out in 2019, there's a big aftermarket of custom parts, and that includes rear paddles. For example, Scuff has a rear paddle system. It's actually pretty good, and it changes the feel of the controller completely. I like them both. And the only real downside or con to the Elite Series 2 paddles, in my opinion, is the fact that you cannot rebind them on the fly. You cannot remap them directly from the controller. That isn't a huge deal because all Windows 10 and 11 PCs have installed by default the Xbox Accessories app, which controls this. Or if you're on console, what you're playing on, the Xbox One or Series, has integrated into the settings in Accessories a full customization suite, and that's how you rebind the rear buttons. So that's not a huge pain in the ass, but it would be cool if you could still maybe hold down the profile button for 5 seconds and a rear paddle, and that would pop it into a remapping mode, and you can quickly rebind it on the fly, just in case you didn't want to go in the app. You had that option. Now with the Dualsense Edge, you do have 2 rear input options. You have these lever backs, which are typical metal paddles. They're labeled LB and RB and match up with each one of these sockets on the back. Also, you might be thinking, Kevin, the back of that controller is scratched to ever-living hell. Correct. The big gouge and a lot of the micro scratches were already there when I unboxed the Dualsense Edge, which is, you could call them manufacturing defects or whatever the hell you want. There's scratches on the back of my brand new controller. Not the most pretty thing in the world. Doesn't really affect anything. And then the rest of these scratches were me or any user of this controller that is going to be swapping the lever back paddles and the half domes. The back is plastic and these are metal. It's gonna scratch them a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of the lever backs, and that is because they are very easy to actuate because they use the exact same actuator switch as the half domes, which are very small and don't really have the same leverage as these levers all the way down here. You barely need to touch these levers. You pretty much sneeze on them and they're going to actuate the switch. As for something like the Elite Series 2, you hardly ever get accidental actuations of the rear buttons. You have to mean it. You gotta wanna hit them buttons. I do like that these lever backs are metal and feel secure, that they're pretty flush with the rear shell, or at least very close. They're pretty comfortable, it's just that they're so easy to accidentally actuate, as they don't require enough strength or resistance to press them. Please remove them from the controller and never touch them again. I'm not telling you to do that, I'm just a mental note to myself. Get those half domes in here, please. Now the half domes, which is Sony's other rear input option, which I prefer over the lever backs, you can install either way because they're identical, so you can put either one on either side. They're very comfortable, unlike the Razer Wolverine, which has a similar looking design where you have to extend your fingers out to cover the rear buttons. With these half domes, because the shape is just that, a dome, it gives you a place to rest your fingers effortlessly to where there's no fatigue on your fingers, at least not for the about 4 hours you're going to be playing with this controller wirelessly. Oh yes indeedy, there's a battery section of the video. Also, these half domes being metal feel very good on the fingertips. You get that nice cool steel on your hands, feels kind of nice. Also, they feel very secure, not very loud. I do like that. But there's a couple complaints here. The first one is going to be that you cannot rebind these on the fly. You have to go into the software, which is integrated a little bit better than the Xbox because you hold down one of these function buttons, a little game overlay pops up, and that allows you to select 4 different profiles. From there, you can also pop into a submenu. That does take you out of your game, but from there, you can create profiles. So just like the Elite, you cannot rebind the rear buttons on the fly, but you can go into the software, which is integrated directly with the operating system of your console, the actual user interface, so it's very easy. It's not like you have to install a third-party app from Razer or Victrix or anything like that. As much as I love the half domes, the fact that on the Elite there are 4 of them and you can remove them as you damn well please, removing all of them or just 2 of them, making it in essence a 2 rear lever or paddle. Plus, I have spent a lot of time with these rear paddles, and just to nail home the sentiment that I mentioned earlier, they are one of my favorite. These are lovely. They're a joy. I like them. They beat the Dualsense Edge. Oh, that might be a thumbnail. Well, the backdrop's not very exciting. thing. Something I heard here recently, I don't know if it's true or not, is the more wide your eyeballs are open on the thumbnail, the more views you get. So kind of like at the pupil mark, you're looking at about 100K, if that. 3/4 alert, maybe a cup of espresso, you're looking at about, you could probably squeeze out 300K on that video. But if you want one of the milli view virals, you need your sockets a bulging. Let's bulge. You bulge, I bulge. Let's bulge our eyes out real quick. Okay, one of the back. Just to have options, I probably won't use the front view because, you know, premium or pro controllers, rear buttons or paddles are kind of the key feature. Stand up straight, Homo erectus, breathe in, controllers out, smile. Okay, options.
Another beatdown given out by this clobber-fisted titan over here. That's going to be battery life. We're talking about an advertised 40 hours of battery life on the Elite. Usually when specs are advertised by the manufacturer, it's either right on the money or it's not as good. This is one of the cases where that trends the opposite way. You're getting an advertised 40 hours of active battery life, but in reality, it's closer to 65 or more, and standby time is astronomically long. I've left this controller in a drawer for months, turned it on, gamed with it for several hours, put it back in a drawer for another couple weeks, and then did the same thing. Then the Edge over here has me on the edge of a conniption every time I play with it, because if I forget to charge her at night, I'm not using this controller, because you're going to get between 4 and 6 hours of battery life with the Dualsense Edge. It depends a lot on the games you're playing and also the features that you have enabled. I do have a video linked in the description below that walks you through some of the settings of the PS5 to squeeze out a little bit more battery life of a stock Dualsense controller, or the Edge, which has terrible battery life because instead of the 1560 milliamp hour battery in a stock Dualsense, Sony had to go with a physically smaller battery, a 1050, tinier battery, but it still has the adaptive triggers and haptic feedback motors, so the heavy battery drain features of the Dualsense, but a smaller battery, getting you about 4 hours of battery life. Yeah, the Elite just mollywops in the battery department. As for input lag or delay on the Dualsense Edge, it is going to be a 250 hertz stock clock, which is going to net you 4 milliseconds of input lag or delay when wired via USB-C, and via Bluetooth, you're looking at anywhere between 6 and 10 milliseconds of lag. Xbox controllers have between 8 and 10 milliseconds, generally 8 milliseconds, on a 125 hertz stock clock. They have a very wide minimum and maximum spread, meaning it's actually not a very consistent connection, and jitters usually up the ass as well. How about the $25 licensed Windows adapter for Xbox? And exactly like on an Xbox console, this light will flash a few times and then go solid to let you know that you are successfully paired. Now there's two outliers here, so we're just going to ignore these two numbers when we encounter them as we manually scrub up through the numbers. Here's one of them and here's the other. Let's just ignore those. But scrolling, rolling, we're going to see a lot of 15.9s, a lot of 16 point whatevers. It does appear as if the polling rate is 50 hertz, which would net it around 16 to 18 milliseconds of input lag or delay, which is not good, but yeah. Can you overclock the adapter? I feel like we've done this before, but we're going to do it again. Filter driver is probably useless for this device without install service. Again, unplug the adapter. Ooh, it's all hot now. It's burning up. That would appear to be overclocked, if I've ever seen one. Might just be buttering my buns, but it does seem a lot smoother. No, the wireless adapter is not susceptible to being overclocked. It is polling rate locked, just like the Xbox controller, which I do still recommend overclocking Xbox controllers due to getting a more consistent connection. It lowers the minimum and maximum spread, brings them closer to each other for a little bit of like a reunion, I guess you could say. Just because it doesn't increase the refresh rate or polling rate to give you a lower input lag or delay, it does give you a more consistent connection, and we've seen that through testing. As for customization, I hate to show up to a fight and then have it be over instantaneously by knockout. You feel like you were just robbed, but that's what happens here. There is no colorways or themes or anything whatsoever with the Dualsense Edge. It's going to be that reverse Oreo design, white on the outside, black on the inside, which goes with the ecosystem of the PlayStation 5. Over here in Design Lab, you can virtually customize every single component of a standard Xbox controller as well as an Elite. Dogged ass hideous, of course, unless you're really into Mountain Dew or Sprite or Sierra Mist or whatever. Come down here, you can do some crazy shit. You can get truly intricate with the customization. Xbox. As far as wait time actually getting one of these Pro controllers in your hand, it's relatively quick on the Edge controller, but much quicker on the Elite Series 2 because you can walk into a Best Buy, Walmart, or a lot of brick and mortar stores and buy an Elite Series 2. That is also going to be the case with the Dualsense Edge, as it is also a first-party controller, but I haven't seen them start popping up in brick and mortar stores yet, specifically because Sony made the statement that they wanted to be the first ones to get those controllers out through PlayStation Direct, and then it was going to be available through third-party vendors. We're past that about month later mark, and I'm still not seeing them pop up at like Walmart or Best Buy or anything. But because the Elite Series 2 has been out since 2019, it says $180 over here. I see this controller on sale new in box condition for about $150, $160 all day, or we can just do this, scroll down. The Core, which is a whore for sure, is already on sale for $110. Just came out, slashed down from its MSRP of $130. And guess what? That's the same exact controller. Let's go ahead and source some Elite paddles as well. So if you just want the paddles, we're looking at about $12 for these Thompsons over here, but that's not going to do it. We want the full accessory suite, what you're going to get with an Elite controller, including a carrying case, which you can get for $23 on Amazon. $133 currently, plus tax, we'll say like $140 an Elite Series 2 right now. And you'd get her pretty damned quick, and you could get it lickety split. Like, go to your Walmart, there's a bunch on the shelf. The Dualsense Edge, and by the way, Sony is now selling the modules over here on Amazon, but it takes much longer to get to you as opposed to just buying them from PlayStation Direct. But the actual controller, the Dualsense Edge, $200 MSRP. This is from the Sony store, and this will get to you March 23rd. It's the 13th right meow. And if you go through PlayStation Direct or directly through Sony, that controller will get in your hand in 4 business days for free, or 2 to 3 business days for $10. However, just because the Elite Series 2 is a cheaper controller than the Dualsense Edge by a fair margin doesn't mean it's a better value. In fact, I think it's au contraire, mon frere. It's quite the opposite, because Dualsense Edge has those swappable modules. It'd be great if either one of these controllers had magnetic Hall effect sensors rather than these potentiometer sensor modules. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, one of the top 3 causes of controllers being thrown into the ditch of e-waste is stick drift, and the fact that that issue is now longer not really an issue, or it's a $20 issue, not a $200 issue. That's a big deal. Value goes to the Dualsense Edge. If you do develop stick drift, I do have a video linked in the description below where I walk you step by step a couple methods on the PC where you can minimize or completely mitigate stick drift. And if that doesn't work software wise, you can always do a partial teardown or disassembly of the controller and clean off the potentiometer thumbsticks with a Q-tip and some isopropyl alcohol. In a lot of cases, that will also do the trickety trick. But value is still going to the Dualsense Edge, because you can avoid all of these problems by just sliding that module off the track and popping in a new one. But which one is better? That is an extremely hard question to answer, because, well, there's a lot of console specific features on the DualSense, the standard DualSense and the DualSense Edge for that matter, like a built-in speaker, microphone, haptic feedback vibration, adaptive triggers, a touchpad, gyroscope motion sensing, a light bar or light strip around the touchpad. It was a light bar on the PS4 controller. And it definitely feels like with each generational leap of the PlayStation home consoles, especially the PS3 to 4 to 5, the controllers have made some huge changes. For example, going from dome-shaped thumbstick caps to hybrid sticks on the PS4 and 5 controllers, adding some of the crazy, weird, wild, wonky, gimmicky features that I just mentioned a second ago. But I think what always makes this a recommended controller for me if you are playing on the Xbox consoles, I do think if you're playing on PC and you're playing competitively, the input lag or delay is simply too high with Xbox controllers. And again, this is if you are playing competitively and you're one of them sweat lords, all right? If you're just casually playing games on PC, then you can use the wireless dongle, which yes, does have about 16 milliseconds of input lag or delay. And this is a very, very comfortable controller. That's the biggest pro, in my opinion, is going to be the ergonomic shape is just so damned comfortable in the hand. Xbox 360 controllers, super comfortable. Xbox One controllers, perfect. Xbox Series controllers, the same as an Xbox One, but with like the bumper shaved in a few millimeters. So since the Edge is less comfortable than a normal DualSense and the Elite is freakishly comfortable as a normal Xbox controller, even with the paddles installed, it really comes down to, do you trust the long-running track record of shitty quality control that we've seen with the Elite 1 and 2? Now, me personally, I haven't experienced much of that with this controller, but my voice got shaky there because you know what I'm about to pick up. But I had to like snake around my boom arm and not spill my cup and a bunch of stuff over here. The Core controller, this is my third one now, and she's a gem. I massaged her haunches on the bumpers here and I put her to bed after a long gaming session, and she's always charged the next day because it has that insane battery life, because it's the same battery as the same everything as this bad boy. But because of the wonky hit or miss and a lot of the times miss quality control that's coming out of the Microsoft factory with these Elite controllers, that's pretty scary. And then you have the DualSense over here, which has the crazy, you know, Joker in the deck that it can pull out and slash at you, paper cuts, watch out, that you can swap these modules if you get stick drift. I really can't in good faith say that the Edge is a better controller than the Elite. This is more handsome, more comfortable in the hand, has better three-way trigger stops, has 4 paddles as opposed to 2, has a high right stick that's actually high if you're into that esports life, and you have 3 levels of adjustment on the thumbstick tension. But if all those dank banger esports shooter features I just mentioned matter to you, then you also care about the input lag or delay, which is 8, and it's always going to be 8 because it's pulling rate locked. In my opinion, the winner would be a non-existent third controller that isn't in front of us, that has the ergonomics and battery life of this controller, as well as some of the other features we talked about like Dpad, in a controller that had adaptive feedback and haptic triggers and gyroscope and could be overclocked and had a built-in speaker and touchpad. And you see where I'm getting at here? They're both lacking, but also quite juicy. It really depends on if you look at your cup as half full or half empty. If you're a fanboy, you are going to look at it as half full, in fact, overflowing for the brim of features. I'm gonna own both controllers, so I'm gonna fill up both cups. I can't pick a winner. It's like a parent trying to pick their favorite child. I didn't birth either of them personally through my gamer canal or anything, but love them dearly. Use them both quite frequently, love them both. I will say, if I didn't get replacements sent out for both of my damaged cores over here, and my experience had been bitter with getting working replacements sent out, that definitely would tip the scales towards Sony, as I have no personal bad quality control experiences. So the Dualsense Edge from a quality control standpoint, but they're both amazing controllers, honestly.
If you enjoyed the video, liking it helps it to get seen by more gamers. This information will reach and assist them as well, which in turn helps me grow this little channel, which I do greatly appreciate. Subscribe for more content like this. I cover news in the gaming community and industry, tutorials helping you get set up streaming and YouTubing, as well as honest gaming product reviews, keyboards, mice, headsets, controllers, mics, chairs, etc. There are some hefty exclusive discount codes found only in the description of my videos and only for the audience here at Gamer Heaven. I have links to all my other platforms and socials in the description below. To get in touch with myself and the stallions and stallionettes of Gamer Heaven, join the community Discord, and check me out at twitch.tv, where I go live every other leap year on a blue moon if it falls into an odd calendar number, and my pH balance is on point. Just kidding. Starting June, I'm going to be live streaming a lot. Thanks for watching. This has been AK40 Kevin hosting Gamer Heaven, and I'll see you tomorrow because I upload daily, all the time, 60% of the time, sometimes, most of the time. Peace.